Listen up to this important public safety message.
After a newborn baby was hospitalized in Oregon last fall, researchers are reminding parents to keep children far away from backyard chickens. In October, the baby was born healthy at a hospital, but a few days later became sick. Doctors readmitted the newborn and discovered he had salmonella. Researchers from the Oregon Health Authority found that the baby had come in contact with salmonella through the family's backyard chickens. Even though the baby didn't physically touch the chickens, his parents were still able to spread the bacteria.
One of the parents was either carrying the organism, not showing any symptoms, but had it in their intestines, or it came on some article of clothing or something that was there.
Researchers say salmonella outbreaks are common, but can severely sicken babies and newborns who don't have the same ability to fight off the bacteria.
Careful, guys, those backyard chickens are going to give you salmonella poisoning, because there's not 100 different other things in the household that could have possibly caused salmonella poisoning. I mean, if you listen to what they were saying there, the child didn't even make contact with the birds, wasn't out with the birds. Somebody must have carried it in on their clothing, or maybe they had it themselves and they just didn't even realize that they had diarrhea. This is an example of how public news can often run with a story, and while nothing that they said wasn't fact, and the health department, they definitely put out the message, hey, you should be scared of your chickens, right? But the news station, instead of presenting the other possibilities, the hundreds of possibilities of where this could have come from, because it was not a proven source, it was just a guess, a possibility. Because they had chickens, therefore it must have been the chickens. So looking at the actual CDC report, investigations and outcomes. First of all, the child was 150 miles away from their house at all times. So it's not like something was carried in there. They're saying that the father had visited the chicken ranch and came back and forth. They were able to match 2 of 3 strains to the salmonella. So it wasn't an exact match to the actual bacteria found on the farm when they checked the farm. The Salmonella Thompson whole gene sequencing WGS pattern of the isolate from the patient matched that of the unpublished outbreak strain. In other words, it's pretty generic. The mechanism by which the newborn was exposed to the strain of Salmonella is not known. So there are a lot of assumptions that are being made here, but nothing is completely concluded. And if anything, the CDC is asking for more case studies on how backyard chickens could impact our infants. It is possible that one of the parents was asymptomatically shedding the organism and exposed the newborn during or after birth. Nothing is conclusive. Now, I promised KGW8 that I would do this video. Believe it or not, I did promise them that I would do this video because it's about misinformation, or how some information without all the other facts or all the other possibilities can lead people down a dark rabbit hole of what we classify as misinformation or misconstrued information, whatever it is today, that people try and label you with. When you don't give all the facts, you don't give all the information, and you steer people in a particular direction, like thinking their chickens are gonna kill them.
And now to some political advertising that I have to say hits pretty close to home. Several of you have pointed out recently that a clip from our show is running as part of an ad to support Mike Erickson, the Republican, who's running for the brand new 6th Congressional District in Oregon. It's an attack ad on the Democrat Andrea Salinas, and it features a couple of comments I made here when we fact-checked an earlier attack ad aimed at Salinas. Here's the part I'm talking about.
Taxes were raised. Andrea Salinas raised them.
Salinas voted for the largest tax increase in state history. That is accurate. The tax is big. Okay, I have to say the first time I saw that, it was quite a jolt for me. I think I saw it last weekend. It's the first time I've ever been used like that. And in case you were wondering, it sort of made me mad.
It could be a very negative thing, right? So if somebody does put out a story where it could be taken the wrong way. It's always important to correct that information. Now, Pat Doris from KGW8 recently contacted me, and I wasn't going to do this video at first, but I was talking to somebody else, and they said I should, and I promised Pat that I'd put a correction video out on this. Pat had contacted me about a video I had released about Oregon shutting down small farmers through their water conservation laws. It seems like these types of stories are starting to become so prolific, you could almost do a video a day on this stuff. But today I wanted to talk about the state of Oregon. And I know that some of you are probably thinking, you know, this is Oregon, this is what happens in Oregon. But hear me out on this, because a lot of these things kind of start in some of these states, and then you start seeing them spread to other states. Okay, so the state of Oregon has effectively shut down small farms and market gardens on a large scale. And they're actually sending out cease and desist letters to farms, and they're using satellite technology to find their victims and then send them these letters and say, you can't operate. And they're doing it in the name of water conservation, groundwater protection. So there are two different laws that they're using to this effect. But let's get to the point of this, because Pat made a good point. He said that the state of Oregon didn't shut down the farms. And that is true. They didn't call up the farms and say, hey, you're shut down. You can't grow any more food on your plot of land. What they did was they sent a bunch of small market gardeners a cease and desist letter from utilizing their water to water their crops. It's not the same thing as shutting down the farm. It's just saying you have to buy water rights in order to continue to water your crops. And I think that's where Pat was coming from. Okay, so just so I'm not missing anything here, he said there are 3 statements I found that are false. 31, the state of Oregon has effectively shut down small farms and market gardens on large scale. He says that's false. And they're actually sending out cease and desist letters to farms, and they're using satellite technology to find their victims and send them these letters and say you can't operate. He says that's false. So to just kind of dig into both of those statements real quick. Well, actually, I'll give you the other false statement he said I made. At 3:07 in the video, he said that I said the lady had an 11-acre property and keeps things pretty simple. She has 3 milking cows. She's been shut down for being called a cafo. He said that's false. She has not been shut down. So I responded to Pat on these 3 statements that he said were false. Okay, and I wanted to start off with that video about the chickens for this reason, because a lot of times, you know, people are reporting on things. They'll give you some facts, they'll give you some opinion, and then they'll leave it up to you to think whatever you want to think. I mean, in that particular instance, they were really putting some fear in the minds of people about their backyard chickens, and they had absolutely no proof that the backyard chickens were even the source of Salmonella. They didn't even know. They just guessed. Okay, they guessed because they have chickens and they deal with chickens, and therefore that must have been where it came from. And we want to put fear in the minds of people for being able to grow their own food. Okay, so number 1, the state of Oregon has effectively shut down small farms and market gardens on large scale. He says it's false. I never said that the state of Oregon went out and shut down the farms. To be clear, what I said was that the state of Oregon said that the farmers couldn't use their water. He said that I said that they sent out cease and desist letters. They did. I mean, basically, if you receive a letter in the mail from your water conservation department that says you can't use your water to water your crops, that's a cease and desist. That's a threat that says, hey, you can't do this. Now, they didn't say they couldn't farm. I mean, they could farm without water if they can grow anything effectively, and they can always go and apply for water rights. Now, most of these market gardeners are trying to grow a living at about a half an acre, maybe 3/4 of an acre, some of them up to an acre. So they can't possibly create the volume of food that they need to create to make a living and pay for their costs of creating the food without obtaining water rights. So just to make sure that I'm saying that they effectively shut them down, that my exact words were effectively. I went in and I went through the process on the state of Oregon's website to apply for water rights for roughly a half acre to an acre of land. And what I found was this: it's going to cost you nearly $1,600 just for the application. To record it is nearly $700. And then you still have to pay for your water rights. And there's a minimum amount of water rights of which you'll have to purchase, whether you're a half acre, an acre, or quarter acre. There's not an escalating scale until it gets much bigger. So in this particular instance, while many large farms that are growing commercial crops probably already have water rights, these market gardeners, who are probably only making about $30,000 a year to begin with, are now faced with having to pay over $3,000, as 10% of the income they're getting off of that operation, into buying water rights to be able to grow crops on their farm. Now, people don't realize that farmers have inputs. They think they just grow things out of the ground and that's it. Most of the time, what you'll end up seeing with these farms is that they're working off of extremely tight profit margins to begin with. I think there was a study that came out this year talking about Minnesota farmers making only 8% of a profit margin. That's very small. Any fluctuation in the market and they're toast. So just imagine throwing a 10% fluctuation at a market gardener. Nonetheless, they have to come up with that money out of pocket, right? A lot of these people, they're not trying to go to the bank and get a loan. I mean, I'm sure that would be nice for the banks because then they can enslave them. What they're trying to do is they're trying to just operate a very just and needed service for their community. And most of them don't have an extra $3,000 in cash lying around. So what do? They give up. And that's exactly what I heard was happening and what I had read was happening in the state of Oregon. So yes, Pat, the state of Oregon essentially effectively shut those farmers down by making it economically inviable for them to continue operating their farming practice. That is effectively shutting them down. And then he said they're actually sending out cease and desist letters. Look, there was an article in a newspaper with an interview with the Water Conservation District that sent out the cease and desist letters. And he even talks about how they use satellite technology and other things to identify farms and businesses and send out the letters requiring them to get water rights. It's all right there. It's coming from the guy's own mouth. The funding for this came out of a 2021 bill. I know that a lot of people are saying, well, the water conservation goes way back in the state of Oregon, and it does. There's always been certain waivers to that. For example, a commercial business, not a farmer, can use up to 5,000 gallons of water a day without obtaining rights or a permit or anything like that. But if you are trying to irrigate, and that would include sprinkling the lawn in front of a business, and I think that's what the intent of it was. Let's hope that that's what it was, because if the intent was to shut down market gardeners, there's something wrong with this. But you cannot irrigate with that commercial use, so the waivers. So you have to go and pay an extraordinary amount of money to be able to get water rights, and it's an extraordinary amount of money for the small market gardener. I don't expect people who are paying $20 for a glass of wine after work to understand that it costs the farmer a lot of money to produce a salad that's going on their side plate. I mean, some of that, to me, is just utter arrogance. There was somebody else who commented on the video, and this rubs me the wrong way each time somebody comes out with this. And they said, well, they're utilizing the people's resource of Oregon to make money, to make a profit. They shouldn't be able to do that without repaying the people of Oregon. Why don't the people of Oregon start paying for what their food actually costs? How about that? Okay, we subsidize farmers, we do all these things to make food cheaper for the general public. Then all of a sudden they want to cut it all off, because they don't like it. They don't like the fact that the farmer, the market gardener, is using their hose and their well to water their garden. So they want to charge them because they're using the people's resource. They're using natural resources to make a profit. How dare they? But what they're doing is they're putting in the effort that nobody else is putting in. People who are buying their food are paying them, but they're paying them with their efforts. You know, that's how markets work. That's how trade works. You know, forget about the word capitalism here for a second and think about it this way. When you put effort in, you deserve to get something in return for it, especially when you're handing that to somebody else. Nobody's going to give you free food, okay? You've got to have some sort of method of trade. So yes, they are making a profit off of their labors to feed people like you. If you can't afford to buy it, maybe you should find a way to be productive yourself so that you have something to give in return. As far as the last point that he made about the dairy cattle, if the state of Oregon had not rescinded their wording on CAFOs, and this was very important wording because there was a deliberate warning, I'll put it up here on the screen, where it said, or you meet this criteria. Either you're feeding a certain number of animals, or you're currently labeled as a CAFO, or you simply meet this other criteria. And that other criteria would have labeled a lot of small farms. Anybody who brings their animals into a place where their feet can stay dry, pretty much. So here's how this would have shut these dairy farmers down. In 2023, a law was signed in Oregon that basically said that anybody that they define as a CAFO, whether existing or non-existing or new, whoever it was, doesn't matter, must go through an extensive water mitigation permitting process that would require them to set up filtration systems, would require them to buy certain water rights. And in the state of Oregon, watering your livestock has been a permitted use for years. Okay, this is all new stuff. And so now you have to buy water rights, you have to go through a permitting process for how you're going to mitigate your runoff water, and the whole thing was a mess. Now that, in and of itself, we know that just the water rights are gonna cost those small dairy farmers $3,000. And even a small dairy farmer, I doubt many of them have an extra $3,000 in cash lying around. Maybe they could have sold 2 of their 3 cows and come up with the money. But now they also have to go through this extensive permitting process in order to be able to show how they're treating their runoff from their 100-foot slab that they milk their cows on. Yes, that would have effectively shut them down. She would have been shut down starting April 1st if the state of Oregon had not rescinded its wording on that bill. So there are the facts. You know, the truth is that these accredited news agencies can put out fact checks on people. And when they put these fact checks out on people, what it ends up doing is circling back around and damaging the people who made the video, like myself. And it's an economic damage, okay? Because you don't get as many views, you get shadow banned, you get all that stuff. And the reason why I don't think that they ever circled back, and I have to give him credit to this. The reason why I don't think that they ever put a video out or anything else like they said they were going to do is because when you sit back and you think about it, you look at the facts, you look at the circumstances, the cost that it would have involved on those farmers. Still is. Never heard anything about the market gardeners. They either come up with the 3K or they're out of business. But when you put it all together, it is effectively putting those people out of business. And the fact that people in Oregon don't understand that, they can't see that, they can't compute that, is why the state of Oregon is the way that it is. Because if people understood how these policies impact people down the line, they'd do something about it. I would think they would do something about it. But it's the fact that they don't get it, they can't contemplate it. You know, somebody in Portland, like I said, that's going out for the occasional $50 steak dinner, buying $8 beers after work with their buddies, they're not gonna understand, you know, what a small market gardener is doing to sell to them, you know, for a minimal return at a farmer's market that they'd never even go to because they'd rather go and support big ag in the grocery store. They're not ever going to understand what it actually takes and how much those costs are putting a burden onto those small farmers. You want to protect small farms, which are better for the ecosystem, better for your water quality, all those things, then you need to wake up and take a deeper look at these policies, because all these policies are doing are putting the farmers that are outside of the incorporated farming network out of business. And you guys are helping it. You guys are making it happen. Now, I guess that does make your trip to the grocery store a little cheaper, but in the end, it also kills a society. So I promised I would do a video clarifying that that word effectively, because I did say effectively. I don't even know why I'm clarifying anything. I didn't say anything that wasn't truth. But I promised I'd do a video just clarifying that no, the state of Oregon didn't say you couldn't farm. They left them plenty of options if they had deeper pockets. They just basically made it financially impossible for them to continue to operate.